So I thought instead of just picking any topic that I feel is relevant, I thought let me just pick topic that you guys might want to hear about. I was going to conduct one exercise with you guys, and maybe we can still do it. Maybe we can perhaps just give it. It would just take like a minute. Let me just share this link with you guys on the chat right over here. It's an open link, so I think as long as you guys are logged into your Figma, you should be fine. All right, there you go. I'll see you all on this link. Well, it's a simple exercise. All you have to do is use the camera, hit the button, and click a picture and just paste your picture on the box, on the larger box. This is just to know the audience a little bit better. Cool. All right. So if you guys see, there's one link which I've pasted, the second one. So those who have done, please hop onto that link. You should be able to be on a page which has got proposed topics. So the reason why I opened up these topics was just to touch upon things that usually are not spoken. And these things are the ones that we directly or indirectly apply in the work that we do on a regular basis. I see that the role of storytelling in design leadership has got good amount of votes, 24. We do have the design thinking framework, which has got the maximum. So we will touch upon that one first. From there, we will move on to storytelling. And if we get a chance, then we will touch upon the design briefs. We are going to play one more game. Okay? In fact, there are a bunch of games, by the way. We're going to play one more game. Now, this is more to just get you guys onto it, so that when we actually go towards the framework, you'll be kind of more open over there. Okay. So let's just play this very quickly. And it's much easier. It's actually a group activity right over here. And let's see how Kishore's team is able to figure out what is fake and what is not. I'm going to start off with each one of these. Of course, you guys can see all of them, doesn't matter, right? So it's a simple game, 20 seconds each. And what would happen is you have to simply guess which one is AI and which one is not. So let's do the first one, which is, you see a painting where you've got a chameleon and you've got another one. So go and hit the +1, which one you think is done by AI. It's not on the title, it's the one, if you guys can follow me, it's the one which's got a chameleon. The question is, which one is done by AI? So the one which has been done by AI, you have to vote for that. All right, so now the second one, where you see the candles and you see a weird alien, right? So let's go for it. All right. So let me reveal the one which is true. All right, so the first one is store AI. All right, so this is the one. You got it right. So the first one is done by Hulara. The second one is done by, she's a designer in my team, Gayatri. It's done by her. The second one, let's see, let's go here. Okay. And which one did you say is done by AI? The second one is done by AI. Is what you're saying? And that is right. The second one is done by the AI. Okay. All right, cool. So let's move to the third one. Very quickly. All right. Which one has been done by AI? All right. You want to know the results? Okay, there it is. None of it. Both are actually done by an artist. All right. Let's move on to the second one. The next one. I'm sorry.
So this one we have to mark which was done by the artist, right? Not the AI.
Which one is done by the artist? That's right. And what are the results? That's quite close. All right. So here's what it is. The second one is done by the artist. He is Scott Fletcher. He is a lead in my team, been with us for quite some time. All right, so let's just get started with what we have right over here. So if you guys don't mind, please join back the second link that you see in the chat, the one that was put as the second one. Let's just look at that, okay? So cool. Now talking about design thinking and the framework for problem solving, okay? So see, largely one thing needs to be understood is when we talk about any design thinking approach, and over here we are specifically talking about mastering design thinking, okay? And we're talking about problem solving, and problem solving not in a micro context, but we're talking about in the macro context. So what is this in the first place? Let me talk about that, and then we'll go a little bit into the depth of each one of this. So let's just say that you're working on any project within an engagement. You're working with the stakeholders. You get a design brief, or you co-create the design brief along with your stakeholders, your client, whoever you're working with. Many times these problems could be about, hey, we want to increase engagement, we want to drive adoption, we want the onboarding to be smooth, right? So these kind of questions, these kind of problems are posed. Of course, you guys will go to the drawing board and you will understand, build things, perhaps talk to your customers and so on and so forth. Okay? If you see D1, which is top right, the experience bit, that box is where most of the experience kind of stays. And this particular thing, you guys can have it for your reference. So in case if you're worrying about noting things down or such, don't worry about it. You will have this at your disposal. So you can always refer to at any point in time that you would want. So this is a framework that I built roughly about 2 years back. And this stemmed from a couple of engagements that we were working on. The first one started in 2021, start of 2021, which was to do with how do we help people who have mental illness and they are at an early stage of mental illness, and when they call 911, how do we identify that someone has one? That was really the brief that we were working on. And I did not have any framework as such to refer to. One of the standard frameworks that we all kind of have learned is to understand who the user is, talk to them, build something very quickly, iterate, and keep improvising. That one. I felt that kind of was just boxing and was not giving a lot of perspective, right? And the other thing is, you must have also come across, hey, when there's design, how do we marry it with business, right? What does it even mean? So this framework that you see is a mirror. What I mean by mirror is, if you see S1 is kind of in correlation to D1, okay? Which is, from an experience perspective, when your job is to make sure what you're trying to build is, in a true sense, that would be delightful. From a business standpoint, you need to understand where it's coming from and how can it align well. Okay? Second one is the touch points. Now, I believe we all understand what a touch point is, right? just to clarify that part, if you take a mobile application, which happens through a cellular device, a mobile device, or even a tablet, as a matter of fact, now those become two different touch points at the same, even though they are both mobile. Like that, an ATM could be another touch point, a channel. Just conversation could be another touch point, right? So it does not have to be necessarily only a channel, albeit a touch point. So what are these is something that we most likely consider when we design, right? And those who are not, then we kind of assume that whatever we are trying to design, it is going to be for the mobile device. Well, the example that I was giving you, that was not true for us in our case, because what we had to consider was all the scenarios because I remember there was one situation where they were making us listen to an audio. I remember, I'm not sure, Kishore, if I mentioned this to you when we met, but this was a situation where the audio was about a daughter who had locked herself in her teens, locked herself, and the father could not do anything. He cannot break open the door. So he informed the cops, and because she was not responding for a long time, he didn't know, and nobody would want to see an unpleasant scenario, right? Well, everything was fine, but at that point, they wish that somebody should have been able to converse with her, because the moment you've got cops at your door, that is even more alarming. Now, for us, what we had to do was, in that particular project, we had to kind of think about multiple scenarios. What does a federal government think about? What does a county think about? How do we ensure that we take care of the nuances that are there with someone who is going through a mental trauma, perhaps? What happens in the rehabilitation? So what happened is we had to think in multiple layers, and the solution was not about, hey, let's just build a device that they could go there faster. Well, that was not the problem at all. So how do you consider that, right? In another scenario where we were trying to build an entire digital ecosystem for Singapore's Ministry of Law, we had to understand how their markets are. And that's where, if you see S2, which is in correlation to D2, kind of started coming into picture, right? Similarly, you've got S3 and D3, which are more to do with, the old battle of, do we listen to the business? Do we listen to the end users? But it has to be a good balance between both of them. There's another piece that I'm going to expose you guys to, a framework where you'll understand what it is. And the last one is the S4, which is the impact, and the D4, which is the engagement. Now, this is partially going to cover what you guys had voted for, and then there were some of them which did talk about the complex and the dynamic ones. So there is one particular framework which is not that old. It's actually by Keith Dorst, who I have been following a lot. Not a guy who you would say that is much into media and such, but I believe his content really makes a lot of sense. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll quickly touch upon this thing. We don't have to go too much into the detail, but if you guys want to reach out to me offline and ask about something, I'm more than happy. So see, our design process largely starts with empathizing with the users, right? Empathize with the users, perhaps talk to them, build things. I earlier mentioned about the 5-step process. See, what happens is, when there is anything that is complex or dynamic, when I say dynamic, meaning you are designing for what is happening now, but the situation might change after a year. How do you deal with that? Like, I know we are all surrounded with the AI buzzword, right? A lot of those things that we've been seeing are actually getting challenged, and hence products have to go through that shift. Now, this is dynamism. If you start thinking about any product which is static, it is dead on arrival in the first place. So this is a framework which kind of helps you touch upon that. Archaeology, very simple. What it talks about is go back in the past. So if you're talking to your clients in your project, just inquire about what you are asking us to do. Has that been done in the past? If yes, why did it not work? Or if it worked, then to what degree did it work? So just dig a little bit deeper into the history to understand and said so that you don't make the same mistakes again, in short. Then there is this paradox. Paradox again is more to do with before you even start interviewing people and such, you understand what has been a certain initial definition that you set up that you believe will not kind of work and become the problem in itself. That's why it's a paradox, right? You start with something, but then you start with something, but then you assume that that's because that's going to be the answer. Eventually that becomes the blocker in itself, right? And we've seen things like this happen specifically during the George Floyd case, when there were protests happening during the Black Lives Matter. Again, I don't want to open that box up, but then, that's a classic context of paradox, right? How specifically people with color get attacked in certain locations, geographies, because of the preconceived notion. Then there is this context. So context is the piece which is, again, this is more to do with understand who your stakeholders are, because see, they are the sponsors at the end of the day, right? So you have to understand their perspectives and then steer forward from there. Some you guys may call it alignment workshops and such, but that's where you really get the context. Field is the place which is slightly different than users. Okay, this is where user slash, put more and more entities to this. I'm just going to steer away a little bit from this conversation. So about the field, I don't know how many of you are aware of the Darwinian philosophy of evolution. I remember specifically there is one library in I think it was in mid 1800 when the Paris Public Library was built. Now, when it was built, it was not just thought about when the humans will step in. The architect actually thought about the furniture, the effect of that when it ages. To an extent, I remember that's still etched in my mind. He had written over there that he also accounted for the mushrooms that would grow 100 years later. And with that, how would the experience be like? What basically this tells about us is there would be natural evolution basis certain mutations that either humans kind of put, make a micro in their mind, or things around it. So again, understanding the field, then there are themes to be really identified, like in what we have done over here, the golf that I mentioned about. These were interventions, but if you largely think about it, those were themes as well, right? How do we ensure that the youngsters are also considered, not just the fact that players are coming in and they're playing and they're going ahead, right? So there are multiple areas. One such was because the fact that Hero MotoCorp in itself is in the automotive industry, then why they can't perhaps fund or create golf carts, which again becomes a natural extension, right? Frames is a part. This is exactly where Keys kind of gives us the line. Although I would not recommend you guys to just blindly follow it. So he has this thing that, if a certain problem situation is approached as if he makes you kind of fill in that thing and then look at it in a different light. But again, any framework that boxes you, I wouldn't recommend that, but I think it's a good starting point for sure if you haven't tried it. The last three are more about the implementation. Futures is all about making sure that you are able to stretch the imagination, stretch the envelope, which one of the examples that I just showed it to you. There are many more videos, to be honest. Time is the only enemy that we have at the moment. Then there is transformation that we are talking about. How do we ensure that this is really pushing the barrier? I do have a failed case study. Maybe I'll speak about it for like 20-30 seconds. One of the largest insurance providers in the US reached out to us stating that how do we turn our employees, full-time employees, into gig workers? This was right after COVID. And we were like, okay, this is a daunting task, because what are we talking about over here? It's not about only the employees, but what happens when they quit, when they want to move from your company to another provider? What happens then? How does that get into account, right? Of course, they wanted to reduce their costs, but along with that, we also had to consider the human activists. We had to consider the legal domains. In short, it did not work. If it worked, it would have been transformative, because when one large player gets into something like this, the industry tends to go in that direction. So I think in hindsight, I think it's great that it did not work, but that was the kind of exercise that was, that really put us in that frame for like good 1.5 months, and we had to really break our head around it. And the very first one that I told you about, the 911 mental illness, that's something which is actually happening, and it's been going on for the last 2.5 years, because it's not a problem that you have one solution and things get implemented. It would never work like that. The last one is, of course, integration, making sure that all the multiple players and contexts that we have, it integrates well. This is not about tech integration. This is making sure that it goes into the fabric of whether it's social, whether it's economical, whether it's any other larger domain that you think about, that it fits in well. So again, this is one of the frameworks to perhaps look into.
Hi Nihal, this is Soumyadeep. In your previous slide, Nihal, you mentioned that structure, strategy and design, right? So there was this C4 or S4. What do you mean by SROI analysis? That the last part, I think C4 or S4 block under strategy. So what is that analysis?
Yeah, that is basically social return on investment analysis.
Okay.
So what that means is, when you are measuring the impact, social impact is one of the aspects, because ROI anyway will get, there'll be plenty of people to basically note that down. But there is also a measurement of how much has your impact made waves in the industry or the demography that you have chosen. That's, again, it has its own measurements to.
So it's the target TG, right? On that basis, we'll measure that outcome. Like, okay.
Yeah, of course, target TG would be there, but to even have the social return on investment, there are certain metrics that have to be planted for to even measure it. For example, say Sweet Greens, right? Sweet Greens would claim that all the ingredients that they source are coming from sustainable farming practices.
Okay.
How do we know? Is it really happening? Blue Tokai states that they source their coffee beans from these places in between Karnataka and Kerala. Like, does it really happen, and to what extent? And with that, really what is happening at the ground? So there are multiple aspects that have to be, of course, planted to be able to see the impact. But if you're able to measure the impact, nothing like it. In fact,
yeah, sorry, Nihal. So this will fall mostly under service design part, right? Like wherein you are going to that extent, wherein you're trying to understand the ESG, or a lot of people have that.
It's yes and no, both. Yes, because in service design, of course, it would be helpful, but it's not something that would necessarily be only applicable for service design.
Got it.
It's a again, I also the fact that it's not that designers have to necessarily go and measure these things, but and these are some examples that I've given. And as you have noticed that I've only put 3 for each one of them. There are multiple that one can kind of get into, but it depends on what are we working on, which one is more relevant, do we need that or do we don't need it, and such things.
All right.
Cool. All right.